And today we are reacting to luckiest cave divers who solved the impossible. Man, y'all remember back when a couple months ago where cave divers and all that shit was like a very big trend, bro? I never understood that shit. I always thought that shit was stupid. You know, one thing I'm happy to say, I never saw no black people participating in that cave diving shit because that shit is fucking ridiculous. Don't know why you would. I don't know how you look at a tiny ass hole in the ground and think, you know what? I want to go explore that. You know. But with that being said, man, let's go to get into the video and see which of these how these cave divers survived the impossible.
Underwater cave nightmare. On July 19th, 2025, a 40-year-old diver entered a flooded cave system connected to a river in Hunan Province, China. He was part of a small group exploring the underwater passages, a dangerous activity even under ideal conditions. Cave diving is considered one of the most hazardous forms of diving in existence. It requires specialized training, precise equipment management, and an unwavering awareness of one's surroundings. The margins for error are razor thin, and the consequences of mistakes are often fatal. During the dive, something went wrong. The diver became separated from his partner. One moment they were together, their flashlight beams crossing in the murky water. The next, he was alone. The visibility dropped to nearly nothing as sediment swirled around him. He swam forward, searching for the exit, but the passages twisted and split in every direction. Guideline? Gone. Landmarks? Unrecognizable. Without a clear path back, he found himself drifting deeper into the system, further from safety with every stroke. His air supply dwindled with every breath. Panic would have been easy, and panic meant death. He forced himself to stay calm, to think clearly, and to keep moving methodically rather than frantically. Eventually, he found what he was looking for, an air pocket. A small dome of breathable air trapped against the cave ceiling, just wide enough for his head and shoulders. It wasn't much, a few cubic feet of oxygen trapped against ancient rock, but it was enough to survive. For now, for 5 days.
What y'all think the air smell like? Or in that, how you think the air smell? I feel like it gotta have like a certain, you know what I'm saying, a certain something to it, you know, to be underwater by nothing but water. I don't know. Let me know what y'all think it smell like down there.
He existed in that pocket of darkness. He
Nigga,
had
5 days, nigga. Nigga, you know how prickly that nigga skin probably was, bro. Even 5 minutes in the shower, nigga, my shit will go from young and youthful to like I'm 85 years old. Nigga, I couldn't imagine nigga, how do you go to sleep? How do you comfortably sleep like that for 5 days? That's nigga. What did you eat? How did you take a shit? Like, I have so many questions, bro.
no food, no light source after his flashlight battery finally died, and no way to signal for help. The cold gnawed at him constantly, seeping into his muscles and bones, making it difficult to stay awake. To stay alive, he reportedly caught and ate raw cavefish, whatever small, blind creatures he could find in the black water around him. Sleep came in fragments, always interrupted by the fear that the air would run out or the water level would rise and drown him while he rested. Above ground, search teams scoured the cave system. Professional divers made repeated trips into the flooded tunnels, but the passages were long, complex, and extremely dangerous. Days passed with no sign of the missing man. His family waited at the surface, hope fading with every passing hour. By the 4th day, many had begun to accept the worst. Then, on the 5th day, something changed. The diver heard sounds echoing through the water, movement, voices, the unmistakable noise of other divers approaching. Rescuers were close. With the last of his strength, with hands that could barely grip anything, he grabbed his flashlight, which somehow still had a faint charge, and signaled toward the noise. The weak beam cut through the darkness like a prayer answered. When the rescue team reached him, his remaining air supply has reportedly dropped to just 4%, barely enough to sustain consciousness. A few more hours, and he almost certainly would have died. He was pulled from the...
That boy had that man Jesus Christ looking out for him that day, brother. Yeah, no other explanation. That boy had that man Jesus Christ looking out for him for sure.
Cave, dehydrated, hypothermic, and barely able to move, but alive. South Wales Cave Incident. On a cold November morning in 2021, an experienced caver descended into Ogof Ffynnon Dhu, one of the deepest and longest cave systems in the United Kingdom. Located in the Brecon Beacons of South Wales, the cave stretches for over 30 miles of mapped passages, plunging more than 1,000 feet below the surface. It's a labyrinth of narrow crawlways, flooded chambers, and vertical drops that only the most skilled cavers dare to explore. The name itself is Welsh for Cave of the Black Spring, and those who know it understand why. Once you're inside, daylight becomes a distant memory, replaced by the damp chill of ancient rock. The man navigating its depths that day had years of experience. He had explored caves across Britain and understood the dangers better than most casual visitors ever could. He knew the passages, had trained for emergencies, and carried the right equipment. But deep inside the system, in one of the cave's most remote and difficult-to-reach sections, something went terribly wrong. He slipped on the wet rock, lost his footing, and felt his body slam against the unforgiving stone. Pain shot through his spine and legs immediately. He lay there in the darkness, trying to assess the damage. He tried to move, tried to stand, but his injuries made it impossible to continue on his own. His legs wouldn't cooperate. Every shift of his weight sent a fresh wave of agony through his body. He was trapped, hundreds of feet underground, miles from the entrance, surrounded by cold, wet stone and complete darkness. Word reached the surface within hours, and what followed became one of the largest cave rescue operations in British history. The South and Mid Wales Cave Rescue Team put out an urgent call for assistance, and the response was overwhelming. Over 250 volunteers from cave rescue teams across England and Wales mobilized within hours. They came from every corner of the country, some driving through the night, bringing ropes, medical supplies, specialized stretchers designed for confined spaces, and decades of combined experience navigating underground terrain. Many of them had never met before, yet they worked together as if they had trained for this moment their entire lives. But reaching the injured man was only half the battle. The passages leading to him were brutal. Some were barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through sideways, with jagged rock pressing against shoulders and hips. Others were flooded with icy water that came up to the rescuers' chests, forcing them to wade slowly while holding equipment above their heads. There were vertical drops that required careful rope work, and horizontal crawlways where progress was measured in feet per hour rather than miles. The temperature inside the cave hovered just above freezing, and the constant dampness made hypothermia a real threat for everyone involved, rescuer and victim alike. When rescuers finally reached him, they found him conscious but in significant pain. His injuries prevented him from walking or crawling, and the only way out was to carry him through the same brutal terrain they had just crossed. The stretcher they used was designed specifically for cave rescues, lightweight, narrow, and able to bend around tight corners. But maneuvering it through the passages was an exhausting, technical nightmare. Every corner required coordination. Every drop required ropes and patience. The extraction was painstakingly slow. Teams worked in shifts, rotating through the narrow tunnels to prevent exhaustion and hypothermia. They communicated constantly, coordinating each movement as they passed the stretcher through gaps that seemed impossibly small. Some sections required them to lift him vertically through shafts while managing his pain. Others demanded that they slide him through flooded passages while keeping his head above water and his body as stable as possible. Hours turned into days. The cold seeped into everything: clothes, bones, morale. Sleep was impossible underground. Meals were eaten quickly between shifts. But the teams kept moving, inch by inch, chamber by chamber, refusing to give up on a man they had never met. Finally, after 54 grueling hours underground, the injured caver emerged into daylight. He was exhausted, cold, and visibly weakened, but alive. He was rushed to the hospital by helicopter, where doctors confirmed he had suffered serious spinal and leg injuries, but would ultimately make a full recovery after extensive treatment and rehabilitation. The rescue was hailed as a triumph of coordination and endurance, one of the most
full recovery. Yeah, that boy had a guardian angel. For 250 people to pull up that don't even know you and be like, man, we gonna go ahead and get this nigga. We gonna go. Man, that boy had a guardian angel looking out for him.
complex cave rescues ever conducted in the UK. Chinese Labyrinth Cave. In February 2025, 5 researchers entered a massive karst cave system in Guangxi Zhuang, deep in southwestern China. The cave, located at the source of the Huawang River, was a sprawling underground maze, a network of tight corridors, shifting water levels, and hidden air pockets buried beneath the earth. The men were scientists, part of a larger expedition team, there to study rare cave fish that existed nowhere else in the world. These fish had adapted over millennia to survive in complete darkness, and documenting them required venturing deep into the cave's most remote sections. It was supposed to be a routine expedition, lasting only a few hours. But somewhere in the twisting passages, they ventured too far. The cave's layout was deceptive. Passages that looked promising led to dead ends, and tunnels that seemed familiar suddenly forked in unexpected directions. 2 researchers became separated from the rest of their team, and before they realized what had happened, the cave had swallowed them whole. When they failed to return on schedule, Alarms spread quickly. Local authorities were notified, and rescue teams were assembled within hours. But the cave's complexity made the search agonizingly difficult. The tunnels were narrow and flooded in places. Visibility underwater was measured in inches, not feet. Strong currents surged unpredictably through submerged passages, threatening to sweep away anyone who entered. And no one knew exactly where the two men had gone, or if they were still breathing. For nearly 3 days, rescuers pushed deeper into the cave. A team of 13 specialists, professional cave divers, trained firefighters, and medical personnel rotated through the dangerous passages, methodically searching every chamber and air pocket they could reach. The work was exhausting and treacherous. Some sections required multiple dives through completely flooded tunnels, where a single wrong turn could prove fatal. Others demanded crawling through passages so tight that rescuers had to remove their tanks and equipment just to fit through, pushing their gear ahead of them in the darkness. After more than 69 hours, they found the first researcher. He was huddled in a small air pocket, roughly 50 feet below the surface and nearly 1,000 feet from the cave entrance. The space was barely large enough for him to sit upright, and he had survived by rationing his breath and staying as still as possible to conserve energy. He was cold, exhausted, and severely dehydrated, but breathing. The team secured him carefully, fitted him with diving equipment, and began the slow, dangerous process of bringing him back to the surface through flooded passages. But the second man was still missing. The divers pressed on, fighting currents and squeezing through passages that seemed to grow narrower with every turn. They called out into the darkness, hoping for a response, their voices swallowed by stone and water. Finally, deeper in the system, they located him, clinging to survival in another isolated air pocket, even further from the entrance than his colleague. Despite the odds, despite nearly 3 full days underground without food, light, or any means of communication, he was alive. Both men were carefully extracted from the cave over the following hours and rushed to the hospital. Doctors treated them for hypothermia, dehydration, and exhaustion, but neither suffered permanent injury. Their survival defied every statistical expectation. Johannes Rusch.
I'm still trying to figure out though, when they be getting in these air pockets and falling asleep, how the fuck do these niggas not, you know what I'm saying, and just fall in the water? That's what's fucking me up. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Cave incident. On the morning of April 15th, 2025, a 43-year-old climbing and caving enthusiast set out with a friend to explore the Johannes Ruscher Cave in the Bieletal region of Saxon, Switzerland, Germany. The cave system was well known among local adventurers for its challenging terrain, narrow vertical chimneys that demanded careful technique, long crawl passages that stretched for dozens of meters in complete darkness, and steep sections that required both technical skill and serious physical stamina. It was not a cave for beginners, and both men had experience navigating difficult underground environments. The two made their way deep into the system without incident. They navigated the tight passages carefully, helping each other through the more difficult sections, communicating constantly as they descended. But on the return journey, something changed. Fatigue set in suddenly, and without warning. The 43-year-old found his muscles giving out, his grip weakening, his energy draining faster than he could compensate. It was as if his body had simply decided it had given everything it had to give. In one of the cave's tightest vertical passages, roughly 30 feet below the entrance, he became completely stuck. He dangled in his safety harness, wedged between cold stone walls, unable to move forward or backward. The narrow crevice offered no room to maneuver, no space to shift his weight or find a better position. Every attempt to free himself only exhausted him further and seemed to wedge him tighter into the rock. His arms burned with effort, his legs cramped painfully, and the cold stone pressed against him from all sides, unyielding and indifferent. His companion realized the severity of the situation immediately. There was no way to pull him free without professional help and specialized equipment. He managed to climb out of the cave and sprint to the nearest point with cell service. Within minutes, he had contacted the Saxon Mountain Rescue Service. Specialized cave rescue teams from Pirna and Dresden were dispatched immediately, loading their vehicles with ropes, pulleys, medical equipment, and everything else they might need. But reaching the trapped man was no simple task. The cave's passages were tight and dark, forcing rescuers to navigate on hands and knees through sections barely wide enough for their shoulders. Some areas required them to squeeze through gaps only inches wider than their helmets, scraping against rock with every movement. Progress was agonizingly slow. When they finally reached him, several hours had passed. He was cold, exhausted, and showing early signs of suspension trauma, a dangerous condition caused by prolonged hanging in a harness. Blood pools in the legs, circulation slows dramatically, and without intervention, the heart can fail when the victim is finally moved. The rescuers worked quickly but carefully. First, they stabilized him medically, checking his vitals and ensuring he was still responsive and coherent. Then they lowered him onto a small rocky ledge to relieve the pressure on his body and restore circulation to his legs before attempting any further movement. The extraction itself required immense patience and precision. One wrong move in the confined space could cause further injury, or send loose rock tumbling down onto both the victim and his rescuers. The team communicated constantly, coordinating each movement as they guided him upward through the narrow vertical passage. They used ropes, pulleys, and their own physical strength to inch him toward the surface, checking his condition at every stage. After several hours of painstaking effort, the man finally emerged from the cave into daylight. He was immediately treated by paramedics waiting at the entrance and transported by ambulance to a nearby hospital. His physical injuries were not life-threatening, and doctors expected a full recovery. But the psychological toll of being trapped in darkness, unable to move, unsure if help would arrive in time, feeling the cold stone pressing against him hour after hour, would likely stay with him far longer than any physical wound. If you'd like to see more stories like this,
Just say,
make sure.
oh yeah, nigga, I bet your ass don't do that shit again. I bet you don't do it again. But anyways, you know what I'm saying? With that being said, man, we gonna go ahead and get up out of here, man. Y'all boys like and comment and subscribe, you know what I'm saying? Let me know what y'all thoughts are. I think the craziest one by far was the nigga that survived 5 days. That shit was pretty insane. You know? But until next time, I catch y'all boys later, man. Peace.